I would say that Colin Kaepernick is the Meghan Markle of the sports world, but that wouldn't be quite accurate. Sure, like Markle, he's a wealthy, privileged brat, just as white as he is black, but nonetheless obsessed with his entirely imagined racial victimhood. So that's similar, but there are some crucial caveats. First, for one thing, Kaepernick can't really be the Markle of the sports world because he isn't an athlete, unless you count the oppression Olympics as an actual sport, which perhaps it is or one day will be. And for another, to his credit, he didn't have to marry into his victimhood. Unlike Markle, Colin Kaepernick isn't riding anyone's coattails. He achieved his status as faux martyr and insufferable, obnoxious prick all on his own. Actually, the more I think about it, we might say that Kaepernick is sort of Meghan and Harry combined. If you mix the two royal whiners together and you combine their powers, you end up with Kaepernick. He's like the self-victimizing megazord. He has Markle's fake racial grievances, but he also has Harry's disloyalty and his penchant for throwing his own family onto the bus and driving over them and then backing up and driving over them again and then again and again and again. He is such a perfect amalgamation of the two, such a manifestation of the worst aspects of both of them, that you almost wonder whether by some strange time warp he might actually be their child. Is Kaepernick the adult son of Harry and Meghan who has come back in time to experience and exploit this era of woke victimhood? That's a possibility we need to discuss. There's a conspiracy theory I could get on board with maybe. Or at least it's just a screenplay someone should write, at the very least. But assuming that Kaepernick is not a victimhood-chasing time traveler, then the real story is that he was conceived by a white woman and a black man, and he was then abandoned by his black father, put up for adoption as an infant, and taken in by a white couple. His white adoptive parents raised him, gave him a blessed and comfortable life, supported him, loved him. And now, after all of that, they find themselves somehow the objects of their adopted son's animosity. That is, whenever he has something to promote, at least. And this week, he's promoting a new book, which means they're going right under the bus yet again. Here's the New York Post report. It says, controversial football star Colin Kaepernick accused his white adoptive parents of perpetuating racism in a new interview. The former NFL star told CBS Chicago that he struggled growing up in a problematic household, a through line he details in his upcoming graphic novel, Change the Game. The graphic novel tells the story of Kaepernick's journey from high school into his storied athletic career it's maybe a little bit overstating it, that heavily centers around his lack of choice in his future. His parents, particularly, tried to steer him in a direction they thought was best, which led to several fights between them and their adopted son. Can you imagine that? Parents trying to steer their child in the direction they think is best? What parent would ever do that? Here's a clip of the interview. Check it out.
Who's spreading a message of empowerment in his new graphic novel, Change the Game, written with author and University of Chicago professor Eve L. Ewing.
I love how you depict yourself in this book, not as some big shot hero, but as a shy, insecure high schooler like we all were. I mean, I'm speaking for you, but.
Absolutely. Growing up, I think still am a pretty introverted person. I hope it's true to form, and that's just kind of how I navigate the world.
It's his true high school coming-of-age story, his journey embracing his blackness, despite resistance from many, including his white adoptive parents.
I know my parents love me, but there were still very problematic things that I went through. I think it was important to show that, no, this can happen in your own home, and how we move forward collectively while addressing the racism that is being perpetuated.
He took cues from his icon, basketball star Allen Iverson, who he said wore his blackness like a suit of armor. And teenage Kaepernick wanted cornrows to match. He's getting what roles, his mom asked?
Oh, your hair's not professional. Oh, you look like a little thug.
Your mom said that to you.
Yeah. And those become spaces where it's like, okay, how do I navigate this situation now? But it also has informed why I have my hair long today.
The grown-up version of Eve wanted to go back in time and give young Colin a lot of hugs. And I was really moved and saddened by the level of kind of self-awareness that he had to develop at a very young age without a lot of guidance.
Now, I certainly am not making any excuses for this guy. He's a scumbag of the lowest kind. There's no getting around that. But you can also tell that the man has been severely brainwashed. And as time goes on with each successive interview, he sounds more and more like a 55-year-old white woman holding a corporate diversity seminar. I mean, just listen to the words and the phrases that he uses. Problematic, perpetuating racism, move forward collectively. And then my favorite, navigate these spaces. How do we navigate these spaces? No human being naturally speaks that way, okay? A former athlete especially does not speak that way. You aren't going to hear a football player in the locker room saying to his teammates, listen, fellas, there's a lot of problematic behavior going on in here. We really need to figure out how to navigate these spaces so we can move forward collectively, respecting each other's lived experiences so that we can unpack our oppression and curate an understanding of our intersectional realities and together come up with solution-oriented perspectives liberated from our post-colonial trauma. It's just not how human beings speak, okay? Rather, it's how a DEI diversity, robot is programmed. And that's what Colin Kaepernick has become, basically. So what is his complaint against his parents? Yes, they took him in. Yes, they raised and loved him. Yes, they gave him a wonderful and privileged life. Yes, they supported him and they set him up for success. Yes, they did everything for him. But they criticized his hairstyle. So all of that is irrelevant. I mean, that is a resentment he holds with him today. He still determines how he styles his hair today based on what his parents told him not to do when he was a teenager. Now, he has a point, though, I will admit. I mean, it really is unprecedented for parents to complain about their children's hairstyles. Right? It's not like literally every parent on earth has this kind of conversation with their teenage children. It's not like every parent, I mean, literally every parent, white or black or whatever color, has to at some point give their child a lecture about the importance of maintaining a professional haircut and appearance. Actually, come to think of it, it's not entirely unprecedented. So I guess Colin Kaepernick went through this, and then the only other person in the history of the world was me, because I can remember when I first started developing facial hair. So I would have been about 3 or 4 at the time, and I wanted to grow a goatee. But my dad, he took one look at what I was trying to do there, and he told me that it looks ridiculous and unacceptable. His words exactly, and forced me to shave. So when is CBS going to interview me so I can tell my story? Where's my book deal to unpack my trauma? But then again, I wouldn't take that book deal, even if it was offered, because I'd rather be broke and homeless than earn money by publicly stabbing my own family in the back. Of all the ways to earn money, that is among the most disgraceful. It's worse than prostitution. Perhaps it's a type of prostitution, actually. Colin Kaepernick is a whore in his own way, prostituting himself by selling his integrity, selling out his own family in exchange for victim points. Now, it's well established, of course, that Kaepernick's victimhood narrative is totally fanciful. He grew up comfortable. He became a professional athlete. He decided to transition to social justice warrior after his playing career had taken a nosedive based on his poor performance, after he got benched for Blaine Gabbert, which is pretty much the worst humiliation a football player can possibly experience. And then that happens, and he becomes a social justice warrior, and through his social justice charade, finds wealth and fame far beyond anything the NFL could ever provide for him. He has not been disadvantaged by his quote-unquote blackness, but rather he has profited immensely from it. Here's an indisputable fact, okay? This cannot be disputed. If everything about Kaepernick was the same, except that he was fully white rather than just half white, okay? If his deadbeat biological father was white instead of black, let's say, then Kaepernick would today, at the age of 35 or 36, however old he is, he would today be an obscure, washed-out backup quarterback with a net worth and profile barely a fraction of what it currently is. He wouldn't have any endorsements. He wouldn't have any book deals. He wouldn't have any Netflix series. At the very best, he'd appear on ESPN occasionally to debate the other talking heads about whether Joe Burrow has a higher ceiling than Patrick Mahomes or whatever. More likely, he'd have drifted off into complete obscurity by now and Maybe he'd own a strip mall or a car dealership or something. His blackness has opened up very lucrative doors that wouldn't exist without it. That's indisputable. The fully white version of Colin Kaepernick is in a much worse spot today than the half-white version. So we don't need to analyze his victimhood claims. They're utterly bogus. They're laughable on their face. Instead, what we should focus on when it comes to Kaepernick is his absolute lack of gratitude. And in this way, he is a microcosm or one symptom of a culture-wide epidemic, and that epidemic is ingratitude. You cannot have a functioning society without a rich atmosphere of gratitude. Gratitude felt and demonstrated by the younger generations towards those who came before and gave them everything that they have. And this gratitude should be especially extended to and begin with your family and your direct benefactors. But it should go beyond that to your nation and your nation's forebears. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to pretend that your family was perfect or your country is perfect. Gratitude doesn't require perfection. It shouldn't require it. What it means is that you recognize what was built for you, what was provided to you, what sacrifices were made for you and for your sake, and that this recognition breeds respect and loyalty and humility and a palpable sense of thankfulness. Where would Kaepernick be if not for his adoptive parents? Where would he be if he'd been born in another country? I mean, you take either his adoptive parents or his country out of the equation, is there any chance he'd have a better life right now? That's inconceivable. There's a very good chance he'd be living in the gutter or dead in it without the very people and the very nation he can't stop complaining about. Does he ever acknowledge that? Ever? Does he ever say it out loud? Do any of these self-victimizing drama queens ever acknowledge that? Of course they don't. Gratitude destroys the grift. And it's much more profitable to be a rotten, disloyal little punk than it is to be grateful and humble. Much more profitable to be a spoiled child who's never satisfied, no matter how much he is given, no matter what anyone does for him. And that is Kaepernick in a nutshell. But he is right about one thing. This country does have some serious problems, big problems. And one of the biggest problems is that it produces people like him. That'll do it for this portion of the show. As we move over to the members block, you become a member today by using code Walsh at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Hope to see you over there. If not, talk to you on Monday. Godspeed.